Okay, people, so My Hero Academia's manga in 2022. Now, we know one of the big things that was said at Jump Festa by Kohei Horikoshi, the creator and author of My Hero Academia, was the fact that if everything goes according to plan, basically without a misstep, that essentially 1 year from the day he wrote that, My Hero Academia would reach its goal. Now, most people interpret that as, oh, it'll reach the end. It'll reach its goal as far as, like, it's going to conclude. Could also mean a couple different things. It could essentially mean that his goal is that ultimately, yeah, he wants to get to a certain place in the story, and that doesn't necessarily mean the end. However, he did follow up with saying that, and if he doesn't reach his goal, then ultimately he'll be coming to Jump Festa next year and saying the same thing, which means that more than likely his goal would have enough impact that he wouldn't be coming to Jump Festa to say the same thing. So going with the mindset of My Hero Academia ending in 2022, one of the big things we got to talk about, or a lot of the big things we got to talk about, is there's still plenty of plot threads that need to be tied up, and can 40 something to 50 chapters get it all done? I'll be honest with you, at first I was like, yeah, I think a year's worth of chapters could get it all done. Upon writing this list out that we're going to dive into and dissect, I do think that it might not cut it, as far as like there might be a lot of things that get rushed through if Kohei Horikoshi is going to end My Hero Academia by the end of 2022, because there's just a lot still that needs to be solved, that needs to be finished, that needs to be done with the story to wrap everything up. Mind you, assuming all of this is under the guise that there is no spin-off or sequel series where, you know, the characters are older, because if that's the case, then yeah, plenty of plot threads can still be loose and hanging around to be, you know, tied up at a later date. But I guess let's get started, people.
No matter how you move, get it done. No matter how you move, get it done. No matter how you move, get it done. No matter how you move, get it done.
Now, of course, one of the biggest things, and there's a lot to it, but one of the biggest things that definitely needs to be tackled is, of course, the final war against All for One. And here's why: the war doesn't necessarily need to span as long as you would think. Like, you know, every time people think of a war arc in manga, you either go usually to two different but very significant, maybe three, I guess you could argue, wars that were very impactful. And that's, of course, people look at Marineford War and Whitebeard War and all that jazz in One Piece, or the Naruto 4th Grade Shinobi War, or even the Thousand Year Blood War in Bleach. Now, all of those war arcs were pretty significantly long. I'd say definitely One Piece's Marineford was the shortest but the most impactful. Naruto's 4th Grade Shinobi War had a lot of controversy, a lot of critique to it, the fact that it did span a long time and there was a lot of issues in between. Likewise with the Thousand Year Blood War, a lot of people will say like the first half was damn near a masterpiece, but once Kubo took that 2-month break and came back, it just didn't hit the same as that first half. So that's the issues with making something long running. I'll be honest with you, if the final war arc against All for One, Shigaraki, and the rest of the League of Villains is the same length as Marineford, it would probably have more of an impact instead of going on and on for years and years, because a lot can get done very quickly but impactfully. I know that kind of just sounded a little bit redundant, but what I'm saying is there's less room for error with less time. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't want things to be rushed. I don't want things to be like, if things need 3 chapters, 4 chapters to get done, then give it 3 or 4 chapters to get done. However, if it does not need all that time, I don't want things extended. Like, you know, for example, the Todoroki family drama with Endeavor and Dabi, that's one of the big things that falls under this war that is supposed to be resolved. I don't think necessarily we need 30 chapters for that, right? Like, I think that would be overkill. I think 10 or less, maybe even 8 or less. I think probably maybe 2 months worth of them having a battle, them getting into the nitty-gritty of it, it could probably resolve, unless Horikoshi decides to go a whole different route and he doesn't just decide to end it all. Like, let's just say what's going on in Wano right now, how Oda is doing it, that yeah, you have fights going on, but then you're cutting in between, so it's not resolving one fight at a time. It'll go back and eventually resolve one fight at a time, but you're having these battles go on and on and on. That way, when it does climax, let's just say he's like, okay, I'm going to wrap it up within another chapter or two, you will feel that, oh, well, this fight has been going on a long time. Even though you haven't been seeing it, you will know that, okay, there's been progression, there's been little events here or there. So if Kohei decided to go that route, then it'd be all right. But like the Endeavor family, which is again something that needs to be addressed, something that needs to be resolved, especially the battle against Dabi, Todoroki, because as a character, Shoto, one of the biggest things that that is left for him to do is basically defeat and you know, stop Dabi, because right now Shoto has come a long way. He's already, for the most part, come to terms with a lot of, you know, his domestic family situation with his father and whatnot. I think the biggest two things is completely accepting both sides of himself. He's at that point of training them, and he's already been like, you know, he's come to peace with a lot of the stuff, but ultimately, I guess, mastering both sides and becoming one person, not two halves to one person, if that makes any sense. I think that's something that needs to happen while he's fighting Dabi, and I think that's what will happen. I don't know, again, if it's going to be 5 or 10 chapters or whatever, but I think that that's significant enough, considering Todoroki is one of the main characters, that it could use a few chapters, obviously more than just like 1 or 2 to resolve. And then at the same time, I think that also will cement Endeavor's legacy as the number one, because one of the things that makes a hero is people that save people, right? And do it from the kindness of their heart, from the love. And whether Endeavor dies in this arc or whatever happens with him, ultimately I do think that him saving his son is one of the biggest heroic things you could do. Family, right? Family, very important. So I think him helping his son, I think at the end of it all, because this is also going into prediction and theory territory, I wouldn't be surprised if Endeavor has to hang up the cape, as far as like maybe he either gets injured too much, I don't know, he becomes a quadriplegic after Dabi gets through to him, or he just feels like after something happens with his son, let's just say Dabi dies at the end of all this, which I feel like Dabi will die. I feel like Dabi is too mentally disturbed to ever go and be like, I'm a good guy now, guys. I think Endeavor ain't going to want to do any of this anymore once he knows, like, oh, my son died, because he's already been haunted by the thought of, you know, Toya dying all these years. I think if he was to actually witness his son die, or die at his hands, or see his two sons fighting, I think he might, after all is said and done, say, you know what, I'm going to hang up the cape, I'm not going to be number one no more, which would also bring in a whole other thing of, okay, so then who's next in line? Who's going to be the next one? Depending on what happens, of course, with Hawks and Best Jeanist, because obviously then technically Hawks would be the number one, although I don't think Hawks wants that at this point, and I don't think he really ever did. So it's Hawks and Best Jeanist. Wow. Oh my god, I could see Best Jeanist being number one at the end of all this. I don't know. He doesn't feel like number one, or what should be number one, but that's a whole other topic. Going into the main character, Deku definitely needs to get a 100% fully mastered feel on all of his quirks, which that seems something that is going to have to be done throughout, like, the entirety of the war. Like, that's something that it needs to start of, like, he's learning it, and then we cut back to him, he's fighting whoever, and then we see it again, and then we cut back, because that is a lot, and that is a tall order. We've seen already, it's gone fast-paced since he's gotten the quirks to where he's able to, at the very least, maneuver with all of them. We need to get to a point where One For All is completely mastered by Deku, and ultimately him just having a complete and utter grasp of it. But I'll be honest with you, a big theory, I might actually name the video of this. Something that I see happening, and I'm jumping my notes right now to say this, but I definitely want to throw it in there, because, okay, him mastering One For All is great, but I'm predicting that potentially by the end of My Hero Academia, Deku is going to lose One For All. He is not going to have the stockpile of all these insane quirks from Black Whip and all of the other stuff that he has in his arsenal. I think by the end of all this, at most, One For All is going to be essentially decompartmentalized, and Deku will stay with the super strength quirk. I think that's the only thing that Deku is going to retain from One For All. I think this is all going to essentially be temporary until the problem against All For One is resolved, and then by the end of it, whether it leads into a time skip new series or just in general how it ends off, I think I envision Deku just having the super strength quirk and also adding a cape to his look as an adult or something like that. Essentially, imagine this. Basically, My Hero Academia right now is Deku's, you know, Superboy era, and then if we do get a Superman era with Deku, then so be it. But I think that that's what's going to happen. He's going to have all of these quirks, essentially kind of like Superman, but the difference with My Hero Academia will be, I think that One For All, considering what it was built for to begin with, to stop All For One, I think it's going to be extinguished, leaving Deku with potentially only the super strength quirk, which would make the most sense, because at the end of the day, Deku being completely quirkless, that wouldn't work. He wants to be one of the greatest heroes. In fact, one of the big things that we see in the teasers of the anime was always of how Deku became the greatest hero, and again, I don't know how much of a great hero he would be without any quirks, even though he does have his brain that, you know, he could basically come up with strategy, but still, I think the super strength is the only thing he's going to be left with. He's going to lose all of his quirks. He's going to lose One For All completely by the end of it. And speaking of One For overall, one of the big, key catalysts to all of it is All For One's brother. I think that that's something that immensely needs to be resolved. Again, we got 40 to 50 chapters to do it. Hopefully, Kohe could get it done. I think their relationship needs to be explored more. I think we need to understand what happened. We get little glimpses here or there. We've seen instances and whatnot, but ultimately, we need to go full-blown into their backstory, get the big reveal of what All For One looks like to begin with, because all we've seen is like the top part of his face shadowed out. We've seen, glimpses here or there. Obviously, we've seen him with his mush face now. That's something that makes me wonder, is there any particular reason? Do we know? Have we seen his face already? And that's why Kohe hides it? Or is there more to it? Like, why have we not seen his face the entire time? Could it be that he looks exactly like Deku? Maybe he's Deku's father, because that's another plot thread that, again, if we're not getting a time skip, absolutely has to be resolved here. Maybe he could be Deku's father. I know that's one of the common, what do they call it, low-hanging fruit of theories of My Hero Academia. He's Deku's dad on some Darth Vader type of stuff, but it could make sense considering, again, why hide his face other than just wanting to make it a dramatic reveal. That kind of reminds me of like Odin in One Piece in the anime, how he was, and even in the manga, I want to say he was like shadowed out constantly, and then when we see him, it's like, oh, okay, this is his design. Didn't need to be shadowed out there, fam. So unless Kohe is going in that direction, it could very well be that we see him and all of a sudden he has like the freckles of Deku's face or something like that. But the way All For One has maneuvered and whatnot, I don't necessarily see that being the case, because why hasn't he even referenced or anything of like my son or that stupid woman referencing Deku's mom or something crazy, you know what I'm saying, that will link things. So it could be totally something else entirely, or it could be that he never had a top part of his face. He was born like that. And also, another thing about All For One that needs to be resolved is the smile. Why can't he stop smiling? Why is it that no matter how bad things get, he continues to laugh? That's another big complex thing that needs to be resolved, and we need to get, basically, we need a good 2 to 3 chapters at the very least fully dedicated to All For One's past and what happened, because that will give us a lot of the clarity. I don't even think we need 3, maybe 2 full length, just, hey, him and his brother had this disagreement. Hey, this is what All For One witnessed, what turned him into this monster. Hey, this is what he looks like and why he can't stop smiling. Because he's always been like an opposite side of Shigaraki, if you think about it, right? While Shigaraki, his trauma led him to absolute rage and wanting destruction of everything. This guy, whatever happened to him when he was younger, ultimately led him to, I can't stop smiling, fam. I'm seeing people getting murdered, people I care about, and I'm happy. And while we're on the topic of it, Shigaraki, his whole character arc needs to come to a close, despite the fact that I've always wanted from Jump, and I still hope if we do get a time skip that that's exactly what it leads to. Shigaraki's character arc, his rage, his hatred, the rescuing of Deku to Shigaraki. And I'll be honest with you, the way I want things to go out with Shigaraki, I don't want no Obito, oh, I'm good again. Like, that's one of the things like that I've always loved about the League of Villains. Aside from maybe Toga, the other ones like Dabi and Shigaraki, they don't seem like they will turn around and be like, I'm good now. Like, they are mad. They don't care. They're not looking for sympathy. They don't want none of that shit. So I would love for Shigaraki, even if he dies at the end of all of this, to look up and look at Deku in the eyes and say, you and All Might, I don't give a f. Like, that's genuinely what I want and hope for with Shigaraki at the end. I don't want him to be a good guy and help out at the battle against All For One, or if he does, I want it to just be like in a begrudgingly way, like, screw you, you know what you did to me, I don't give a shit, I'm gonna do you dirty too, but not like, Deku, I'm doing it, I'm helping, alright, like, none of that bullshit, because that's not Shigaraki's character, and that would feel like a major betrayal. At the end of the day, Tomura is a villain in and of itself. He's just entangled with an obsessed, psychotic freak like All For One that has his body right now, but he needs to be freed from that. And then depending on what happens, because like either Shigaraki is going to die at the end of all this, or he's going to have to get imprisoned. There's nothing even close that should happen like what's happening with Aoyama right now. How everybody's like trying to vouch for him, like, no, he could help, he could trick All For One or something. No, that better not happen with Shigaraki. Shigaraki, either you go to jail or you die. Maybe you do something a little redeemingly in a way, but there's no walking out of this one unscathed. Something has to happen with this dude. There's too many bodies under his belt. He's too crazy. He's too off the walls. I think he probably will end up in jail at the end of all this. That might lead to whatever if we get another story at some given point. I always go back to that. Kohei and them did say, the 10 years, 10 movie plan. I gotta keep throwing that in the air. Of course, the obligatory moment for each of Class 1A. I ain't gonna lie, I'm not the biggest fan of that because there's a lot of them that I don't really care for. Like, there's some of them, like, give Momo her moment. Absolutely. Give Tsuyu, give Frog Girl her moment. Of course. I want a little funny Mineta moments, obviously, to liven things up because this is going to be a really hardcore, depressing war. So, yes, give some of them, but some of the other ones, like, even Jiro's cool, whatever. Give Jiro a moment, sure, but some of the other ones that I can't even remember half their names and stuff like that, don't really care, but it's been par for the course that Class 1A does everything together, experiences everything together. So yes, I am fully 110% expecting at least a couple of chapters of they all have their final moments of, hey, we did something, because obviously, clearly, not all of them are going to have, like, a big character arc or anything like that, but I'm expecting at least, again, a chapter or two where everybody has their moments. Again, not all of them am I against or, like, bored out of my mind of them having their moment. Like, I would love a Tokoyami moment. Hells yeah. Like I said, Momo, Frog Girl, Jiro, give her a moment. Of course, the big three in and of themselves, Deku, Todoroki, and Bakugo. And speaking of Bakugo, one of the big things that Kohei Horikoshi said was he is expecting Bakugo and he wants everybody to expect him having his moment. What could be his moment? Well, I go back to something that was said by Kohei Horikoshi regarding the second film, Heroes Rising, was that ending was initially what he was going to do at the end of My Hero Academia, where, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the film, you got 3, 2, 1, make some noise! Essentially, Bakugo gets his hands on One for All as well. It's passed on to him, and he uses it in combination, in unison with Deku to take out that villain. I wouldn't be surprised if Kohei still wants to do something like that, but maybe a little more logical in the way it's done. Like, that would kind of be dope, and I still think it would be really awesome if it was a three-way pause. Deku, Bakugo, and Todoroki all using this to stop once and for all the threat of Shigaraki and All for One. And in general, I think his moment is probably going to be something along the lines of, once again, pierced, stabbed through, whether it's a film, whether it's whatever. That is always a moment for Toga. I want something beautiful for her. Again, it could be a chapter or two. Like, I'm trying to calculate or whatever, but at least a chapter or two for Toga, for her character to be wrapped up. I fully expect, to be honest with you, again, unless we're going to have a continuation, and he does things, unless she finds a totally different meaning of happiness and how to find happiness that doesn't involve hurting people and sucking their blood and stuff like that. So Toga, I could expect her to actually die. People don't really value the villains like that, and they look at them in a different light, where we're like kind of sympathetic towards their plight. They probably wouldn't bat. And Spinner doesn't have much of moments throughout here, and he dies a very I don't want to say silly, but very the anime just, for whatever reason, doesn't care for Spinner. And what's up with All for One and Shigaraki were fully separated? If Shigaraki didn't have any more of All for One, of like, we beat it out of him, he told us this. So that's up in the air as well regarding Dakaraki. And while I got you here, Aoyama's redemption, again, another 1A moment. That's more so probably going to be in the 1A section of, but I don't see Aoyama anything really bad happening to him other than Deku Exo Chaco moment, even though, like, pairings in My Hero Academia aren't the biggest deal, because it's like Deku Exo Chaco since day one has been the thing. It's not like he's gonna be like, yo, but Momo got them melons though. Like, that's not gonna happen. And then I guess one of the biggest things that we got to see, and depending on how this, swings, is how everything else will end in terms of Night Eye's premonition regarding All Might. Essentially, All Might's quote-unquote death in My Hero Academia. Will it happen? What will happen? I feel like he did survive death multiple times, and they probably won't kill him off unless we're really wrapping everything up, and that's the final catalyst to pushing Deku. The final lesson, so to speak, of the Academia portion is getting over your sensei's death, getting over the person that puts you on and puts you in position. They're not going to be there forever, so I could potentially see that happening. But then at the same time, there's also that battle of, no, we're beating whatever it is that Night Eye saw. We're going to beat that. It's not going to come to fruition. So we could also have that as well. It's a toss-up. I'd more so prefer maybe going the darker route of, no, you know what? I don't want to go the darker route. Screw it. All Might survive this long. I guess let him live. We'll have other deaths around there that'll be very impactful. Maybe something bad could happen, per se, to give a demonstration to Deku, like, yo, he's not going to be around forever. Maybe All Might, even in his, small and decrepit form at this point, will get severely hurt. Maybe he'll have to be in a wheelchair moving forward, a la like a Might Guy type of situation. But I mean, he survived this long now, and I don't want to always be morbid about everything because death isn't the solution to making a story very impactful. Let's let All Might survive. Screw it. And I don't care if people get upset like, no, maybe it does make for a better story in your eyes. I don't want it to make for a better story in my eyes. I want it to make for a better story that the lesson is that Deku almost lost his sensei, and he knows that his sensei ain't gonna be there forever. So screw it. Let's beat fate. Let's stop fate from having its way. And Night Eye's ability, let's make it that he got it wrong. All Might's going to survive. And I want to throw in there as well, like, can we get one more moment for Aizawa? I know he's damn near crippled, but his design now looks so freaking sick. I'm just saying, had to squeeze one in for Aizawa. And yeah, people, My Hero Academia 2022, assuming that the manga is going to wrap itself up, those are all the thoughts that I have, the plot threads that need to be resolved, how I feel they're going to be resolved. Curious what you guys think. Any theories, predictions, how you feel all of this is going to play out, definitely let me know. And what are your expectations for My Hero Academia's manga and the series as a whole in 2022 and beyond? But that's all I have for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked anything I had to say or enjoyed the video, drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you want more from me, make sure to subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram. Hit that bell to get all notifications. And if you want to follow any of my other social media, links are in the description below. I'm from that world. And as always, people, have an awesome day. And remember the golden rule. Anime and manga for life, boy. Have an awesome day. Peace in, and it's gonna be an interesting time in 2022 to see how all of this plays out. Yo, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm gonna look like I'm silly as hell by the end of all this. Like 90% of none of this happens, and we're just like 2 more years of My Hero. Yeah, craziest shit has happened. Have an awesome one. You